Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, the channel where we talk all things BYU and Big 12. I'm Trevor, and with me, as usual, is Adam. And Adam, I've got to say, your eyes don't look nearly as puffy as they did this weekend. How you
Yeah, I
feeling?
know. I've been through the grieving process. Started to come out of it a little bit. It's still really fresh, really tender. But eventually, you don't have any more tears to shed, and so it is what it is.
It is what it is. Well, I got to say, so normally we do um, a live reaction show Saturdays Night Live after each game, and we didn't this last week. And I always said win or lose. We lost last week; it didn't come up, but it wasn't because I'm a sore loser, even though maybe I am. My daughter on Saturday night was in a play, broke her arm, and I spent the evening in the ER and did not get back until much later, and I was helping her, get to sleep and everything, and dealing with all of that. So I did catch most of the fourth quarter, but at that point, I wasn't about to hop on and record. So hope you forgive me. It wasn't because BYU lost, although I guess I'm glad I got to avoid that conversation. I wasn't ready to process those emotions on top of what was basically literally adding insult to injury, my daughter's injury. So it was quite the evening, a lot of emotion. So I think it was probably for the best I had some time to step back and process this a little bit. But we will be doing it, assuming there's no other emergencies or catastrophes going on for the remainder of the games this season. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can catch all of those. Like this video like this video, and also later this week, we've got someone lined up from an ASU podcast, Stomp the Bus, and they're going to come on and discuss help us preview the upcoming matchup this weekend. So be sure to come back and check out all of that content. Now, having said all that, Adam, what the heck happened on Saturday?
Well, we talked last week about how Kansas is a dangerous team. And if you had told me they'd lost 38-35, I wouldn't be shocked. I am shocked that we held Kansas to 10 points and lost. The way we lost was really shocking. And I feel like we should be sitting here complaining about how the score should have been 31-10 instead of 31-17 because of that weird quick kick or pooch punt, whatever you want to call it, and hits the helmet of a player and they get a free touchdown out of it. But really, our defense holds Kansas to 10 points, and we didn't pull it out. So it was really disappointing by the offense. Just poor execution throughout. I think play calling is always the easy one to point to, and I've talked on here before where I think that's too simplistic. I do have to take a minute to rant about the fade at the end of the second half. I hate that call in the red zone at any time. At any time. It's not just the end of the half. It's not just the context. It's a low percentage throw. It gains you nothing in the grand scheme of your strategy. So I hate it anytime unless you have Puka Nacua catching balls and it's against Boise State and he comes up with the greatest catch ever in the history of BYU football. Outside of that context, don't ever throw a fade. It blows my mind. So I do take exception with that one call, and that was very frustrating. Frustrating way to end the half. But throughout the game, this is a bad defense. This is a bad defense, and we come out and laid an egg. And so it was disappointing. I think there's obviously a hangover effect from the rivalry game. I don't think that rivalry game should be played in the middle of the season. There's a reason why big rivalry games are played on the last week of the season because it is emotionally draining for everyone involved. And so you saw Utah go out and get thumped by Colorado, also in uncharacteristic fashion, giving up 49 points. And BYU comes out and can't score. And so great effort by the defense. Special teams did great, and offense just couldn't deliver.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. The score was shocking, and the way BYU lost is shocking. But before, I guess the first thing on my mind is I think fans just need to take a deep breath and relax. Like I saw so much, and now I wasn't on a whole lot. Like I said, I had a hectic evening, but I saw from what I saw on Twitter, like the instant reactions, like, man, we suck, this or that, get rid of,
Yeah.
all of a sudden the A-Rod hate came out again, which, I think there has some validity to it. And I saw not much, but a little bit of Retzloff hate and other things. And I'm just like, everyone needs to cool their jets. You can't one week say, hey, we're underappreciated. Nobody values what we do. They don't know who we are. Well, they're about to find out. And then like the second there's a hiccup, be like, oh no, and just give up. Like, I hate that. I hate it completely. We have to realize, take a step back and look at this in the context of everything that's going on, and then take a deep breath and realize, what? We always knew going undefeated was there's extremely low likelihood of that happening. I mean, if you would have told me before the season that 10 games in, BYU would be 9-1, I would have been ecstatic. Now, the way in which BYU lost that one game is incredibly frustrating. And I think it's fair to have some criticisms for this team and higher expectations based on what we've seen throughout the year. But just to throw up our hands and just kind of give up and, and start pointing fingers and blaming on everybody. I do not think, I don't know. I hate that kind of fandom. Like, everyone take a deep breath. Let's, it was disappointing loss. There's a lot that I think this team could do better, and we know they're capable of it. But it's a little premature and a little bit silly for us to be exceeding expectations by this much and to just be completely out on this team. So that's where my emotions are on this. You hit upon a lot of good stuff though. Like, nobody saw this as being a low scoring game. You mentioned 38-35. I picked BYU in a close one. I think that was about what I had predicted, in the both teams scoring in the 30s, being a shootout. And I thought it was the defense that was going to struggle. Turns out it was the opposite. And what gets me is, I went back after the fact and rewatched the first 3 quarters of the game. And at no point, even though the score was close the whole game and it was low scoring, at no point was I watching this game thinking, wow, BYU should be nervous. Like, the whole time, even knowing the outcome, watching the game, I'm just thinking, okay, BYU looks like they're in control. Any minute now, they're going to get it kind of together, and and things can start pulling away. And they didn't. You mentioned the fade at the end. What about Baylor Romney coming in cold off the bench? Is it okay then? Maybe. But I think
Maybe.
he's done though. So no, yeah, that was extremely disappointing, especially when you go back and it's funny because what I did is I went back and I freeze framed it. It looks like, now I've seen other people do it too on social media, to look at everything that he's seeing. And I don't know if that was like his first option. We don't know how that was called, what he's instructed to do, but it looks like there may be Baylor Romney, Chase Roberts cutting across for a drop up. And even if he doesn't get it, you're end up on the 1 or 2 yard line. This is the one time when Satake finally has timeouts at the end of a half.
I know. Game management was really good in the first half.
You could have actually run it and afforded to use at least one of those timeouts if you wanted to save the other one for, a potential field goal kick. So it should have been, should have had something on the board there. So that one is incredibly frustrating. And then you talk about the pooch punt. And I don't want to take that away from Kansas, because I have to assume that's kind of what they're hoping for. Or at least they're just trying to, I don't know. I guess I never really thought about it in that context. Like, what's the point of faking it unless you're trying to have happen exactly what had happened, or you're just trying to avoid the return, thinking, our return is dangerous. They didn't want to put someone in a position to do that. So, yes, it's unlucky, but again, like, BYU's been a beneficiary of good luck plays a lot this season. And now a lot of that is, yes, luck, but it's preparation, right? They put themselves in the position. It was the right play call at the right time, and they executed it really well. So I don't want to take that away from them. Like, they earned it. It's not like, oh, this, whatever. It was a great play. It was executed extremely well. Jacob Robinson still should have had that ball. So it was a double unlucky play. That's where the real bad luck was, is like, how many times did he not come up with that ball?
Seriously, you kick that because you're hoping to catch a defense off guard, not knowing A, what's hhappening, or B, how to avoid the ball. Don't touch the ball. People get it scrambled in their head. What do I do? I got to jump on it. And that's what I thought Jacob Robinson did at first. I thought it hit a Kansas player. And then Jacob Robinson was just panicking and jumping on the ball, and it got lost. And I'm like, we'll have it back. It hit a Kansas player. And then you realize it hit a BYU player in the head. I mean, the odds of that happening are so slim. And like you say, props to Kansas. That's what you want. You kick that because you're hoping for chaos, or you pin them deep. I mean, it's a super smart move by Grimes. It really is. But it just turned out to bounce not in our favor. And like you say, we've had a lot of good bounces. We've got a lot of luck go our way, and at some point, it's going to go against you, and you have to play to a degree where you can overcome that. And BYU just wasn't doing that on the offensive side of the football.
Well, and as badly as they were playing, they were still in control of that game to have another drive, which they did. Get down there in scoring position. Obviously, it would have been nice to have a field goal at the end of the first half, because then it changes, that drive and the end of the game. But there was so much time on the clock. So, it's even as badly as things were going, even with the ball bouncing against BYU and some bad luck plays, they were still in control, and they still were not able to come up. Again, credit to Kansas, because their defense came up big on that last drive when they had to at the very end. But BYU, the false start, with the snap infraction, whatever, on Connor Pay, that was killer.
Yeah.
And it was just,
that was brutal.
BYU got in his own way. And at the end of the day, everyone's talking about Jake's, his kill it and his audible. And I don't know what he was seeing. I'll be interested to hear kind of what that was all about. I did think that was a little weird to run that play to the short side of the field. But I saw somewhere somebody saying, yeah, there's numbers. It was actually a good call. They just got beat. I'm not a coach in there with BYU to say, yeah, this is the game plan, this isn't, or what. But it did strike me as a bit odd that when you had that far to go. I mean, obviously you're playing 4 downs at that point, but I don't know. So there was a lot. There were some other miscues, I think. But so it's just frustrating the way, because again, they played poorly, but they still were very much in position to win this game. Actually, I felt like in better position than they were against Utah.
Oh yeah,
probably
absolutely.
against Oklahoma State. So I really still wasn't even all that nervous, and I kept thinking, I was like, "There's no way my daughter's going to break her arm and BYU is going to lose this game in one night. It just can't happen." So it did happen. And the last thing, this isn't really BYU's play. This was just another note that I had that I thought was wild as I was rewatching the game. So they had this segment there in the middle of the third quarter when BYU's going on their really long drive, which I want to come to that in just a second. And what's his name? Mark, the commentator, Mark Jackson. No, that's NBA. Anyway, they're talking about Jake Retzlaff and his Jewish faith and everything. And then as soon as that's done, he's talking, BYU has, I believe they had the ball, and he's like, yeah. And Retzlaff is out there. He really wants to atone for his mistake at the end of the half. And I was like, atone seems like a really weird choice of words right after just talking about his Jewish faith. And I'm sure that wasn't intentional, but I just thought, wow, I don't know. I would be like, if I was in his ear, I'd be like,
well, they've got Day of Atonement. They've got, that's still,
sure,
part of the Jewish faith. They can embrace that part. But it is interesting how Retzlaff has brought that faith to the forefront, and at a time where you have to be so cautious about discussing religion, and there's been so much discrimination on both sides of the Middle Eastern conflict, and Retzlaff just wears it. He wears it out there. He calls himself the BY Jew.
They won't even say it on TV.
They won't.
They won't know. They say his nickname, his self-proclaimed nickname that they'll dance around it. They'll show the video of him saying it, but they won't say it.
Interesting. Yeah. So I love that he's put it out there and made it such a forefront of who he is, and it's so much a part of the culture of BYU, and embracing religion. It's so cool to see that at the forefront of all of his interviews, and all the discussion is his Jewish faith. I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. Everyone's like, that's weird. Well, you know what? Like, if anything, most of us understand what it's like to be the odd one out. And so I think we're very accepting and embracing of that. And also curious the same way that I think some people, the way people look at us in a lot of settings. And so, no, I think it's absolutely great. And it's great for the Jewish faith and people that look up to that. It's great for the church, for BYU to have that component as well. So really cool stuff. Getting back to that really long drive, do you see that as, what do you make of that? Because that drive was, I don't know, was it 9 minutes or something?
10 and a half.
10 and a half.
10 and a half. So that seemed to me that was the game plan going in, is that BYU intentionally kept it a low scoring affair, long drives. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a brilliant offensive game plan. It really was, because Kansas is so high powered offensively. You need your defense to rest. You need them to come in fresh, because they're going to have a tough battle against a very athletic offense that has just been destroying everyone lately. And so I thought it was brilliant to keep them on the sidelines. You keep it a low scoring affair, and then you do put it on red zone execution, which is gutsy, because Kansas has been very good in the red zone, but so have we. And so I thought, it's not a brand of football I love. I like quick strike. I like a lot of points scored, but conceptually and strategically in this game, I thought it was great. And that's where A-Rod is not going to get a lot of credit, because at the end of the day, we scored 13 points against a bad defense, and that's all we're going to look at. And there is some accountability for that. I mean, I'm just as frustrated as the next fan. I'm sure A-Rod is too. You don't want to score 13 points against that defense. But the idea of these long, prolonged scoring drives to keep Kansas's offense cold and on the sideline, I thought was a brilliant move and gave him a good chance to win.
Yeah. So my only issue, and I agree with what you just said. My issue with it is that it really gives you a very small margin for error on offense. And BYU's offense did not fulfill their side of the bargain. Yeah, they weren't completely terrible. Obviously, they moved the ball. They did some really good things, but at the end of the day, you still have to put up points in order to for that strategy to work, and just couldn't do it. And so I want to look at a couple things here if I can find the right window. So I thought this was really interesting. Kansas's offense is from Greg Wrubell on Twitter, but he says, look at this. It's a season low of total yards, season low of rush yards, 73 in total.
Yeah.
Season low tying of 17 points, season low 13 first downs. That's 4 fewer than other games. Season low 52 plays, and season low 33% third down conversion. So they are a team that actually converts really well.
Which I think was our greatest accomplishment in that game. Kansas is so good on third down, and we have not been good on it. That's been our Achilles heel on defense. If anything you can point to in our defense, any weakness, it's our ability to get off the field. And we kept him at a 33% third down conversion percentage. That was incredible. Jay Hill deserves huge props in this game.
Defense was outstanding, and that's what I think part of what makes this so frustrating too. And then Kansas here, this is from Terrell Williams. He says Kansas averaged 31.7 points per game of 420 yards of football offense coming into tonight of total offense. They hung 45 points and 500 plus yards of offense on Iowa State. BYU's defense held them to 17 points, 240 yards of offense. One of those touchdowns was on a pooch punt. Turnover. Again, can't take the credit away from Kansas for accomplishing that. But to put in context, 7 of those points were not scored in a traditional fashion.
The defense didn't give up those points. Special teams did.
And people are going to ding BYU's win over Kansas State for not, being, they only because of turnovers, this and that. Well, fine. Then we can point this out. So I think it's a fair point. In terms of BYU's defense, not in the overall, I think in the context of the overall game, yes, the 17 points, but just looking at what the defense did. Yeah, the defense, it did take a very well-timed pooch punt that worked out perfectly for them to capitalize on that and score that touchdown. So I think that was, I think, again, just to the point of to give the defense the credit it deserves, because that was outstanding. Joe, we had a few tweets here that I liked. He says, no one should be fired. Again, talking about A-Rod. My biggest issue with the offense is that it's called like we value game control over points, is what we were just talking about. Going on a 17-play drive is great. It also assured that Kansas would be in the game late unless the offense was perfect. So again, Kansas, if you limit the number of drives they have, you're also limiting the number of drives you have. And if you're not going to score on those drives, go the whole field and, minimum points, it does put you in a precarious situation. I thought this one was also interesting. BYU's percent of available yards by game, and I think this is interesting. Average is 46% across college football. But you look at each game by game and what BYU is able to do against Kansas, 61%. I mean, that should be a winning number, especially when you limit Kansas as well as you did on third down conversions and on scoring and just slowing it down. That should have been enough.
It came down to red zone execution.
Well, that's exactly yeah.
That was it. It was red zone execution was the difference in the ball game. The single thing, BYU pitched a near perfect game in all other aspects. And again, I think you handle a high powered, potent offense in the right way. But you're right. It leaves you with a low margin for error. And we've been so good in the red zone. So if you're going to ask me, I'm going to roll the dice. Say, yeah, if it's going to come down to red zone execution, we're going to keep their team off the field, and whether or not we can execute in the red zone. Yeah, I'll take that.
So I guess my question then is, because red zone, obviously it gets more difficult because obviously the defense is more condensed. There's less, it's harder to spread them out and get the space you need to get everybody wide open. And so then the question is, well, what's going wrong for BYU in the red zone and why are they not able to succeed? I mean, in a lot of ways, we just push the field very methodically, or push down the field very methodically on that drive, obviously. And then at the end of the day, well, I'm confusing drives, but at the end of the first half, and you're that close, it's like, well, why don't you give it to LJ Martin? Can't you just run it and push it instead of throwing a very risky play pass like that? And so I don't know, like what is the answer for BYU to improve in the red zone?
Oh, well, they've been great all year. This game was an anomaly. I mean, they've been very, very good in the red zone all year. It's getting back to what they've done well, especially when you've got a weapon like LJ Martin. I think they've been able to power run in the red zone. They've been creative in the red zone, and I mean, A-Rod's in a no-win situation. Every offensive coordinator is, because if you don't score in the red zone, either you were too conservative, right, and you can't just run it in the red zone, or you were too cute because you tried to call a creative play. And I feel like A-Rod's balanced that really well this year until this game. And I don't know if it came down to as much play calling as it did execution. He's getting a lot of flack for the end of the game trying to run out the clock on a couple of those plays. And I hear that argument and I share that frustration a little bit, but at the same time, you've been running the ball great. This is a bad run defense. You should be able to pick up 5-6 yards in the red zone with the game on the line with either of those run plays, with either one. Either the fly sweep gets you 2 or 3 yards. The speed option, whether it was audible into, it looked like Jake had a path to gain at least 2 or 3 yards there instead of pitch. I don't know that it was play calling as much as it was execution. I feel like if it's 1st and 15 in that scenario, I don't mind running the ball. You have time to run the ball, and you've been good running the ball. You should blow that team off the line and get at least 4 yards there for LJ Martin. So it's BYU has been very, very good in the red zone. It's a question of, can you fix the offensive execution struggles that plagued you against Utah and against Kansas? You could say Utah, well, that was a rivalry game. That's the best defense we faced all year. I mean, there was a lot coming out of that. I was hopeful that this was going to be the game where we got back on track offensively, right, and looked more like UCF than we did Utah, but we didn't. And we came out and we were just out of sorts. It looked like receivers were running the wrong routes. We were dropping passes. It was all of it. It was the gambit, and it was really disconcerting. And that's where I'd put it on A-Rod more than the play calling. I felt like the players have got to be better prepared. They got to communicate better. We can't have sloppy offensive penalties. All that's on the coaching staff. And certainly not to agree where I know fans are in an uproar and calling for people's jobs. And this offense has been really, really good this year. As far as compared to last year, the step forward, even compared to 2022, I think this is a very good offense. I like the direction it's going, but it was a bad game.
Yeah, it definitely was a bad game, and a lot of people have need to go figure out what's going on, and hopefully they address these things this week. The go to response after the games from the players seem to be, oh, we had a bad practice this week. Now, do you buy into that? Is that an excuse? And do you think that now that there's one loss out of the way, that there's building pressure, that now this team can go play more free and loose? What do you think on how do they proceed?
Yeah, so I don't know that it's an excuse. And having never played college football, it's hard for me to properly assess that. My instinct is always that, well, why didn't someone recognize this and stand up on Wednesday and say, hey, that was a really cruddy first 2 days, or right, or on Thursday, or at some point. Hindsight's 2020, so everyone's looking back and figuring out, well, what did we do? Well, it was a pretty bad week of practice. Well, somebody stand up and say something. But again, I've never been a part of a college football program, and that would be the obvious answer that every team should do. But moving forward, I'm concerned. I don't think they necessarily play free and loose. The Big 12 title game appearance is on the line this week at Arizona State. So, no, you're not free and loose. And you just came off a bad loss. You've got some offensive struggles that you're trying to figure out. 3 out of the last 4 games have been one-score games by the skin of your teeth against teams that you should have beat, all with a losing record. And so why are we struggling against these bad teams when we should be this elite team that I think we are, and I think we can be? So there's some major problems late in the season that they got to figure out. I don't think they're playing free and loose, and I think there's cause for concern. I don't think you fix that by stepping back and saying, "Hey, let's refocus and have a good practice." Are they? Is it fixable? Yeah, it's absolutely fixable. Is BYU ever going to come out and honestly? Is any program going to come out and say, "Well, here's honestly what's happening"? No, you don't hear about that until at the end of the season last year, where people are like, "Well, Kingsley Sumatai didn't show up to practice and still got to play." Well, whatever it is, right? You don't hear about stuff until after the season. In the season, it's the right thing to do. You close ranks, you figure it out internally, and all of us fans get to be on the outside guessing, like, what happened? And we're not going to know. You just hope that whatever's going on the last few weeks, they can come out and fix it. But to me, it's not a 1 week thing. It's not a 1 week fix. We've been kind of hit and miss. You take that UCF game out where they were brilliant. There's some concern there.
Yeah, there really is. I saw something. I should know this off my top of my head, but how many, we've only scored a few touchdowns ever since the halfway through the UCF game, or maybe with 1 quarter left, if you count it up, and then all the Utah game in Kansas, there's something broken with this offense. I was thinking the end of that UCF game, you were calling off the dogs at that point. Utah game, weird things happen. Kansas, yeah, it looked like, things were weird. Was there, spillover effect, kind of hangover effect from Utah into this game, or was it just a fluky week? It's hard to say. I don't know if there's reason to completely freak out yet and be completely concerned that, oh, this team is broken, this offense. But there's clearly some struggle, and there are things to address. And as you said, I think a lot of it is execution. In this game, there were some miscues. I mean, that happens every game, but there was one where Marion looked like he had a step on his defender, and he went the opposite way of where Jake was throwing. I don't know who that was on, but there was a misunderstanding there. Later, Lassiter had several steps on his defender, was wide open, and Jake just completely overthrew him. And so, again, it's easy to point everything back at Jake, but I mean, there's execution errors, going everywhere. And so with this offense, and again, you're not going to have a perfect game. The guys on the other side of the ball are playing too, and they're really good players as well. So it's not just, BYU didn't play well. Obviously, they were going up against a good team, but there's obviously some sort of slippage and some things they need to do. So let's move on now. Going into this next week, and as we talk about that, and why don't we go ahead and start with our picks, and then we can kind of talk about and preview this Arizona State game. So first of all, here are our picks from this week. So we had identical picks. So I switched West Virginia not to give, I did it last week and it ended up benefiting me. So again, I guess the law of averages this week, it bit me in the butt. So uh, you pulled ahead of me there, but yeah, we really needed Cincy and to do us some favors. It would have been nice if Utah had played better, but man, Kansas State is the one that this would be. BYU would be in a very different situation right now had
Yes.
Kansas State just taking care of business.
I totally agree, and that was really frightening. I was watching that game. And seeing how good Arizona State was playing, and Kansas State did lay a bit of an egg. It looks like Kansas State is just a somewhat immature team. I think that the moment's getting too big for them when they really need it most, and now they're on a really tough 2-game skid to Houston and Arizona State, and Houston did not look good at Arizona. I completely bought into that bandwagon, and they were awful at Arizona, and so now it looks even worse for Kansas State losing that game, and so they've got some struggles they've got to figure out. But that puts Arizona State in a position now to play for a berth in the Big 12 title game, and they've got a head full of steam. So you're right. If Kansas State had won that, it's a completely different context going into the Arizona State game. We still need a win, but the opponent is in a different place. And I feel like it's the exact same thing we were saying between Iowa State and Kansas last week, where we wanted Iowa State to win, so we got Kansas coming in thinking, "Oh, I can't go bowling." And now they've got every motivation. And who knows, between Kansas and Colorado, that'll be an interesting game this next week. So yeah, Kansas State needed to pull that out. It was disappointing.
Yeah, to say the least. And I want to get into all the breakdown of scenarios in just a moment. But so here's where we're at. I actually went through and I was behind you a couple games. I thought I was going to drop back another, but then I went through and did it in a spreadsheet to make sure all my adding was right, and it actually closed the gap for me. So I've been shortchanging
Some special math there. Is that right? And
it's been up there this whole time. So
we all just have to take your word for it.
Either go back and watch the other videos. Make sure to like them when you do, and share. But and go add them up for me. But I'm pretty sure it's right now. I don't know what happened in the past, but anyway, at any point, anyone could have called me out on it. So, all right. Why they go back? All right. So now this week, Arizona looked really good against Houston. Do you buy it? Can they continue against TCU?
So I believe the UCF Mirage when they demolished, I think it was Arizona, and then I bought into the Houston Mirage when they beat K-State. So I'm done with Mirages. I'm going with TCU just because Arizona looked good for 1 week. We're gonna go with TCU.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably the smart choice. I just went with vibes right now when I made my picks this week.
There's so many close games this week. This was one of the toughest weeks to pick.
So I do think TCU's overall been the better team, obviously, this season, and they can put up points. So Arizona's going to really have to score a lot, I think, to beat TCU. But so it's probably a bad pick, but I'm going with it. And all right, so then we got BYU, ASU. You have not been shy to pick against the Cougars in the past. Do you think they can do it and keep their playoff hopes alive?
The answer to that is no. I have the Sun Devils winning this week. And just for the reasons I said before, I feel like we're going into a similar scenario as last week. You're coming off a difficult situation. It was a rivalry win the week before. Now it's your first loss of the season, right? So emotionally, how do you bounce back from that? The defense is going to play well. Offense has had their struggles. Can they figure it out? And I just feel like I'm being served the exact same slice of pie as last week, where I felt like they could pull it out. And now ASU is playing even better than Kansas. They are motivated. They unexpectedly get this chance at the berth in the Big 12 title game. And I just feel like the trajectory of BYU and ASU are going in different directions right now. And I worry that now we've got to go on the road to play an ASU team. Could BYU bounce back from that? Do I think they're the better team overall? Yeah, absolutely. I just being in the exact same situation as last week, I can't see us pulling this out.
No, I'm with you. All your concerns are Understood. I feel the same thing. I just am not going to pick against BYU as long as I think there's games that I think that they can and should be in. And just like Kansas, I knew it was going to be a tough game. We've been saying that for a long time. A lot of people have. This wasn't shocking. If anything, I watched that game, and even though BYU lost, I watched that game less afraid of Kansas than I was before the game. If that makes sense. Like they
Yeah.
looked very beatable. Like BYU had a great
Yes.
game plan against them. And arguably should have been able to come out with the win. Kansas did just enough, credit to them. But, so I still think BYU should be in this. Do I really think they'll win? I don't know. It's going to be a tough one. They're going to have to really pull things together against a team that's really gelling right now and shut down. And we've played against a lot of really good running backs this season. I think there's a ton of them in the Big 12. Scatterboot might be the best, and it's going to be really tough. So we'll see if BYU can do it again and if they're up for the challenge. The difference with this is they can also do it through the air. So
Yeah, Levitt's picking up steam. He's pretty impressive. I will say I have been wrong the 2 or 3 times I picked against the Cougars, so I'm happy to jinx us again the other way, and I'm just doing my part to help us win.
Hey, appreciate it. I will take the win on that one. So this is one. What do you think of? You mentioned Colorado and Kansas. Kansas is rolling right now. They're still playing for, their life is on the line to make it to a bowl game, going up against another team that has really been cooking lately. Can Kansas go in and pull out a third shocker in a row? Almost a fourth, because they were in really close with K-State.
I know, and they've been in really close in every game.
Yeah, that's true.
But I just feel like at some point it's going to run out for them, and I think this is it. Colorado is playing so well, and Colorado's strengths match up really well for Colorado against Kansas's weaknesses, and that's the deep ball, that's the athletic passing game with speedy wide receivers. And I have Colorado in this one in a shootout. I think this is going to mirror the score that we thought the BYU Kansas game is going to be, and Colorado's going to have to score 40 plus to win this game. But they can do it, and they look like they're playing really good ball right now. But I stressed over this one because Kansas is motivated, they're talented. I think Jalen Daniels can pick apart that Colorado defense. And so this was a 50-50 game, and I went with Colorado because they got the hot hand right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Colorado is going to be too much for Kansas, even though I do think Kansas is a better team than their record suggests. All right. Texas Tech and Oklahoma State.
Yeah, can't pick Oklahoma State probably for the rest of the year. We'll see what happens next year, but Oklahoma State is Oklahoma State right now, and for whatever reason, they're in shambles.
I'm with you. I made the mistake, even though Texas Tech has been like hot and cold at moments, which seems to be kind of their MO in the last couple seasons. Oklahoma State, I had a similar thought as Kansas this year. I was like, hey, they still have a lot of talent. They're still a dangerous team. Like, they're down right now. They're going to figure it out. They were kind of all over the place last year, and they were able to pull out some really impressive wins. And every time I've picked them, I've been burned. So I am off of the Oklahoma State train altogether, and we'll just be, I think, picking against them. If they win and beat me, so be it. But I'm not going with them. Oh, sorry. And I moved on to the next one. So you got West Virginia at home over UCF.
Man, this was so hard. You got two demoralized teams. West Virginia is just down in the dumps after that Baylor game. I mean, there's so much pressure to fire their head coach. And UCF, same scenario. Nobody's happy there. A lot of frustration. They did play Arizona State tough on the road, and so maybe you lean towards UCF. But West Virginia's been hot and cold, just like Texas Tech. And just when I thought they'd lose a bunch of games, they come out and they win against Cincy. And so I can't figure out West Virginia. They're at home, so I went with them. But I could have just as easily gone with UCF.
Yeah, I feel like I'm always wrong about West Virginia. I went with UCF on this one. No real rhyme or reason. And since this was a tough one to pick, I was glad that we picked it differently, because I don't know what to make of this game, honestly. So,
yeah.
All right, Baylor and Houston.
Yeah, Baylor, no doubt. They are moving. I like where Baylor's at. I like what they're doing. I think they win big against Houston at Houston.
Yeah. Yeah. This is also another team that had a lot of things to figure out at the beginning of the year, made the QB change. I don't know what other changes, but whatever they've done, They're playing really good ball right now. And so I'm sure they'd like to have that one against Utah back. But let's see. Oops, sorry. I jumped ahead for you again. Speaking of Utah, you picking Iowa
That's
State.
all right. Well, that's an easy one. Utah's another program right now where you just can't pick right now. Oh,
I forgot I
I
picked
mean,
Utah.
you're gonna have to explain yourself a little bit, but Iowa State is not necessarily the most dangerous team in the conference anymore. But I don't know where Utah is going to manufacture points.
Yeah, I don't feel real good about this pick. Obviously, I thought I picked Iowa State. I feel like they've got another win in them at some point this season. I don't know. That might be giving them too much credit. I also think Iowa State is just kind of, I don't know what to make them. Just as soon as you think you figure them out, they're ranked again. It just feels like one that I could see them dropping, that they really
Yeah.
shouldn't. And no matter what you say about Utah, they still have a really good defense. And, and Iowa State's still going to have to get past it, although they've got a good offense. So should be a good one.
Yeah, it'll be a good game.
I don't know. It was probably a bad pick.
I
but
did the same thing in the West Virginia pickup. For some reason, I was thinking I picked UCF because these are all 50-50 picks, man. It's a tough week, like I said.
All right, last one. This is a good one. Cincy and Kansas State.
Yeah, even this one is tough just because Kansas State's been struggling so much. I'm going with Kansas State because Cincy has stumbled, and I thought Cincy was similar on a similar track to Baylor, but then they drop at home against West Virginia. West Virginia's not looking good, so I just don't think Cincy has enough to go on the road against Kansas State. I know Kansas State is feeling demoralized, but they're still a really hard-nosed, disciplined program. I see them bounce back after the loss last week.
Yeah. I had to double check. I'm with you on this one. This is another one that I thought about a bit. I do think overall Kansas State's a better team. They're at home, although we said this about Kansas. Kansas, but I mean this last week against who'd they play? Who'd they lose against?
Kansas State?
Yeah. Oh,
Arizona
no, they
State?
lost. Yes. Oh yeah, how could I forget that? So, yeah, we've said it about him before, so I don't really know. This one really could go either way. So, but it's an entertaining lineup. Which actually, well, I'll get to that. We'll get to that later. First, I want to go through and look at here's how everything shakes out right now. And when we look at it, everybody with 4 or more conferences, the first column here, losses is out of the picture for the conference championship game. Now, everybody with 3 or more, even Iowa State, these guys, everyone between that yellow and red line, they don't control their own destiny. They are dependent on some help, and in some cases, like West Virginia and several of these teams, actually, they need a lot of help. They need some very weird and specific scenarios that seem very unlikely to happen. And so it seems like, in all likelihood, either like, because you're not going to have BYU and Colorado both drop their final 2 games. So in all likelihood, at least one of those teams is in the conference championship. Obviously, the one that we've already talked about, this game this weekend between BYU and Arizona State, is really going to dictate who's in the driver's seat to get one of those spots for that game. So, I mean, this is like a playoff already for BYU this weekend, and they need to come out and win, because otherwise you're then relying on Arizona to beat ASU on that final week, and then you got to take care of business against Houston. So BYU can drop this game and still make it, but it seems very unlikely that it'll happen. And I don't want to go through all the machinations and scenarios, but the good news is for BYU, they're still in the driver's seat to play for the conference championship or the Big 12. Which means they can still go play, win that game for, and get a spot in the very first college football 12-team playoff, which is amazing. If you would have, I mean, I know we're down about the Kansas game right now, which is fair, but if you would have said, hey, give you 11-1 season and you're able to go play for the conference championship, Would you take that now, or do you want to play the season? Well, yeah, I would have taken that before the season easily. Like, I would have been ecstatic, like, great. And it'll just be disappointing knowing that, that where BYU was, but we knew all along that it would be very hard to win out the whole season. And maybe as fans, and maybe the team too, started looking too far ahead and thinking that, it did feel like an inevitable season, that BYU just was going to always find a way. And unfortunately, in a game that really felt like they could have found a way, they didn't. But the good news is BYU's still there, and they're still in the thick of things. The bad news is, now if BYU goes to the conference championship game and loses, it seems very unlikely that they're going to be able to get an at-large spot in the
For
playoff.
sure. For sure. Yeah, the at-large opportunity is gone for BYU now. It's win the championship game or don't go to the playoff. But I agree with you. There's a lot of gratitude right now for the season that we've had. And I know BYU fans don't want to hear it, and I don't want to hear it, but if we go 10-2 or 9-3, man, that is incredible and absolutely unexpected. And it would be an awful way to end the season on a skid, on a 2 or 3 game skid. That would just be that. It doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth. But you got to step back and say, man, it's been a ride. This team has given us an incredible experience. And so no matter what happens in these last 2 games of the regular season, it has already been an amazing season for BYU. And if we end up in the Pop-Tarts Bowl instead of the playoff, it is what it is. And you got to like the trajectory of where we're going. But you hope that we can deliver on these last 2 games, get ourselves in the Big 12 championship game. That alone would be a huge statement. And I like our chances against anybody in that championship game because of how we've played. So I'd love to see us get there, but you're at this point in the season now where you've got a loss and you got to take a step back and look at the big picture. And I do hate the era of social media because of what it does to the players and the coaches. It's just, I hate that they get subjected to this rampant criticism, call for their jobs, and so should be benched, and all of a sudden we forget that we've had a 9-0 season and a number 6 national ranking, a top 10 team, just some amazing stuff that hasn't happened in a very long time for BYU fans, or once in the past, X amount of years. And so it's been an awesome season. It will continue to be an awesome season. I certainly worry about the game this weekend, as I've stated, but regardless of the outcomes, this has been awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would have taken a 9-3 season before. I thought 8 was our absolute limit, and that would have been everything going perfectly well.
Yeah, exactly.
And playing meaningful football into November is just fantastic. You can't really ask for more. I mean, BYU making the playoff is really, and that's the thing, is like the dream is not over. The miracle season isn't over. If BYU goes on to win out and win the conference championship, they're still in the playoff, likely still a bye in that first game.
You'll have a first round bye. Absolutely.
Above Boise State, because you're beating a now ranked Arizona State, and you'd have to beat most likely a ranked Colorado team.
Yes, exactly.
2 more ranked teams. That should be enough to keep you ahead of Boise State, no matter how good that loss was.
Yeah. It is no doubt, if BYU wins out the Big 12 championship, they have a first round bye in the playoff, without question. They're in the driver's seat for that now, and so they can do that. And I believe, if I'm reading that graphic correctly, a win against Arizona State seals our place in the Big 12 title game.
Yes.
At least an appearance, right? We're in the Big 12 title game, because if we lose against Houston, now we've got 2 losses, and we got the tiebreaker over Arizona State.
Tiebreaker.
Well, Arizona State's got 3 losses by then. So.
Iowa State could still win out, so I don't think it's guaranteed.
Okay, that's true.
But because then it goes to the next tiebreaker. There's probably people that can already figure it out. I think there's too many variables still at play now, but I think then it goes to your similar opponents, or your best similar opponent that you played in conference, and how you beat them. So I'd have to go through and look at all that. There's so many
scenarios, but it's again, to be at this point in November is super exciting based on where we were last year. It's our second year in the Big 12, and we come in and we are still number 1 in the conference. We're still the top of the conference. despite what happened last week. That's how well we've played this year. Is
Mhm.
we still have the best record in the Big 12, coming off a very frustrating loss. And so, man, if the Cougars have it in them to bounce back from that, to play a great game in Tempe and beat a very good Arizona State team, you got to feel good about where we're headed, and our opportunity in the Big 12 title game. So
Absolutely.
we'll see. Big weekend.
I need to point out, so this will be posted probably around the time or shortly before this week's college football playoff rankings come out. So we don't actually know where BYU falls in line, although so far it's been pretty similar with the AP. We have to imagine they're probably outside of the top 12,
Yeah.
which is
Absolutely.
unfortunate, probably deserving because of Kansas's record. Although again, I don't think that's giving Kansas enough credit for who they are right now. But so we're anticipating a little bit, but I do want to preemptively vent a little bit. And this is coming from Dennis Dodd, and he's talking about all of the the playoff and how the logic behind all this works. But he says we already live in a world where the likes of SMU and Boise could be getting first round CFP buys by winning their conference, while Alabama and Georgia could be playing in the first round. For entertainment's sake, the possibility of ASU even mattering has been captivating. When every team in the old Pac-12 had 2 losses, it was a disgrace. And this is the point. I guess this is where the point that I was making. When every team but one in the Big 12 has at least 2 losses, it's a Jackson Pollock acid trip. But when 14 of the 16 teams in the SEC all have at least 2 losses, it's competitive. Rant over, and now back to the season. So I think that's a fair point. SEC is able to spin it in a way that makes them look good. Oh, it's because every team is good. And then this was some BYU dude on Twitter having an exchange there with, I think it was Josh Pate, who's, loves the SEC and defending him. But he says, points out, so they have wins out in terms of out of conference wins in the SEC, a win over Clemson, who's second in the ACC. And then there's Wisconsin, 9th in the Big 10, Michigan, 11th in the Big 10, and NC State, 14th in the ACC. So said outside of Clemson, glad to know the top 4 or 5 teams in the SEC can beat the 9 to 14th teams in other power conferences. Very impressive. Outside of Clemson, there is no marquee out of conference win, which I think their exchange started with pointing out that Oklahoma State beat Arkansas, and so just having that exchange. And then Kelly Ford coming to bat for BYU, he says that he thinks that a 10-2 BYU team should be able to get an at-large bid consideration. And it kind of depends on how everything else shakes out. I think Georgia beating Tennessee was bad. I know at the time we wanted Tennessee to lose because we didn't want them to jump BYU in the rankings. Of course, BYU would have had to win. I think Georgia getting that third loss would have taken them kind of out of the picture, created a little bit more room there at the top. So we need some things to go in our favor to even have hopes. And so, I mean, if you lose to, like, let's say Colorado in a conference championship game and it's a close one, maybe, but I think BYU doesn't really control its own destiny at that point. You really need some other things to go your way. So, but good to know at least someone out there, has our back in terms of that. So we'll see where the committee ranks BYU shortly, and then we can complain some more about it. But at the end of the day, you win, you're in, and it's all in BYU's hands at this point. And so. Anyway, this is good. This is cathartic. Help me get past it a little bit. I'm excited for this game. Now BYU's just got to really show up. I mean, this is a crucial game. Obviously, this can't be understated. The playoff is here. So good luck to BYU this weekend. If you haven't already, please, again, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and be sure to check out our other content throughout the week. And as always, go Cougs.
Go Cougs.